Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Clarity at Speed Live. We are now in the third and final session of the day, the afternoon session, but we still have 5 talks coming up. So just a reminder of what we're doing today, Clarity at Speed Live, 15 talks, all 15 minutes each, all with a 15-second summary at the end. The idea being to give you super bite-size and actionable insight into all sorts of different things, from digital marketing to startups to workplace culture, diversity, sustainability, the lot. We've had some great talks so far today, but we've got some great ones coming up as well. Later on this afternoon, we'll be hearing from Marisa Thomas at Bloom and Wild about their thoughtful marketing movement. We'll be hearing from Tim Armu from Fanbytes, all about TikTok and reaching Gen Z. We'll be hearing from Sharmadean Reid, MBE, about her story with Beautystack and how she's empowering change for female business leaders. But right now we have Isabelle, my colleague Isabelle from the Journey Further Book Club, who's going to take us through the next 15 minutes. How are you doing, Isabelle?
I'm good, thank you. I'm sure everyone's sick of seeing my face by now.
And mine, I'm sure.
Cool. Thank you, Nathan. Yes. So over the course of the next 14-ish minutes, I'm going to share with you what I've learned from a year of reading more nonfiction business and marketing books than ever before, and how you can read more of these books and more effectively use them to make positive changes in your professional and personal life. Essentially, how you can turn reading into action. And I guess I just wanted to say before I start that it's pretty nerve-wracking to share your thoughts on learning and reading, which is something that the majority of people do subconsciously. I guess for a fear that my proposed tactics for reading smarter might be quite obvious to some of you, and the all too common imposter syndrome of why anyone would be interested in how I read books. But it has been an amazing kind of 9 months for me for looking after the book club, and here we are, and I've been delighted to be able to read more books than ever. So to begin with, I have to caveat what I'm about to share by saying that I am the biggest fan of reading. I believe that it's not only a way to glean information and widen our knowledge on a certain subject, but it also provides an opportunity for meditation, contemplation, and escapism, things that obviously have been in quite short supply this year. So I am exclusively talking about non-fiction development books here. I'll always starkly defend the importance of carving out time to enjoy reading and escaping into different worlds. But for the purpose of business and work and problem solving, sometimes we do need to broaden our knowledge base and look for innovative ways of working quickly. UNESCO conducted a study in 2013 which showed that more than 2.2 million books were being published a year, which is all around the world, and that number is only growing. So my job and the Journey Further Book Club serves to go a little way to try and alleviate some of the stress of this age of abundant information that we live in. So over the last kind of, as I say, 10 months or so, I've had the opportunity to read 78 books. 21 of those have been fiction. That I just talked about, which leaves 57 books that I've read that have spun the topics of kind of self-development, mental health, leadership, communications, business, creativity, and problem solving, and all of the things that fall in between those topics. So how have I read this many books? Well, to be completely honest with you, if you're a completionist, I haven't read 57 books. Like many readers, I keep track of my reads on Goodreads, which is a terribly designed, terrible user experience platform, which I'm absolutely addicted to. You can create lists and bookshelves there of books you want to read and keep track of your kind of yearly total. But when I started to think about the books that I'd gained the most from this year, I couldn't see any of those reads on my good list shelves. And there's a point here about the desire to complete things and to do things in a certain way. I'm going to be sharing my 4 tips on how you can read a lot more of these business books. And that involves being smarter about the bits of the books that you do read, and approaching the learning process through a different lens, one of efficiency over achieving goals and numbers and figures to kind of tally up at the end of the year. So I want to revise what I said at the beginning about having read 57 business books this year to I've understood the core principles of 57 business books this year. So first things first, reading takes up a lot of time, and the average person reads around 200 words per minute. So you can improve that quite quickly if you read a lot and often, but let's say the average is 200 words per minute. Take a book then, a well-known commercial business book, like, for example, Deep Work. We're talking around 300 words a page, sorry. So if you're looking at a 263-page book like Deep Work and reading that at 200 words per minute, it would take you around 395 minutes or 6.5 hours to read that non-stop. Now, doing anything other than sleeping for 6.5 hours non-stop is pretty unattainable. So with distractions and rereads and pauses, you might be looking at kind of 7 to 8 hours to read Deep Work cover to cover. I recently read Deep Work in 2 hours. I loved it, and I've since used the insight from the book to create a deep work zone in my flat and to commit to an hour of undisturbed writing a day. So how have I done that? I got everything I needed to know from the book using these 4 tactics. Step 1, read only the first and last chapters, and it can save you around 4 to 6 hours per book. Let me just go back. You might say that's cheating, reading just the first and the last chapters. It is, but it also isn't. Any author worth their salt will write a compelling introduction. It's a sales tactic for the book. The introductory chapter is the reason that you're going to keep on reading. So it's where the premise of the book is laid out, the contents are explained, and it's where you can get a feel for the author's authority on the subject and the quality of the writing. Then you have the conclusion, which, when it's done well and edited well, should conclude the main points covered in the book, obviously. And it should also restate the overarching idea and how you can use it. And most importantly, explain any pitfalls that you should be aware of with the methodology presented. So when you have got less time than you would like to learn, but you're still committed to that, this is what all you need to know from the book and take it away with you. So I'll come back again to this idea that learning is a personal experience. And this is a tactic that I've had to kind of ease myself into, but I really feel that if you want to gain the key insights from any given book, that reading the first and the last chapters is a fantastic place to start. I should say that then if after reading those first and last chapters, you're excited by the book and the idea and the writing style, of course, do read the rest of it. But this is a great way to test out the material before committing to a full 8 hours of it. You've gained the knowledge of the book by reading the first and the last, and if it's not for you, you've saved yourself several hours. And if you still want to, you know you're going to read something that's of use to you. So you're going to read all of the key information in those first and last chapters. How can you then turn that information into something that resembles an action list? So my second tip is to be very clear on your objective. When you're going into the reading, you'll want to have a specific situation or problem that affects you in mind, what it is that you're trying to solve by reading this book. So it might be that you want to improve your leadership skills so as to better support a team member. It might be that you want to be better prepared next time there's a conflict at home or at work. So you want to work on your conflict resolution skills. You might have a burning desire to create something, but not really know where to start. Approaching the book with a clear objective on what your mission is, what your objective is that you'd like to solve, will help you to more robustly understand the words on the page and grasp the information that you're reading, and ultimately encourage the cogs in your brain to get moving, so you can figure out how it would apply to you. That leads me on to tactic number 3, which is come armed with a pencil. It is a bit controversial, and I know that in some of our book club chats we've chatted about this idea. Book purists are going to tell you that it's sacrilegious to draw on a book, and I used to feel the same way. I still would never ever write on a story or a work of fiction, but again, for the purpose of my learning and maximizing the amount I can learn, I found that I was able to comprehend much more when I underlined the keywords and sentences on a page, annotated the points I'd like to come back to, and even jotted down any ideas that I had that came to me whilst reading, so I could revisit them with ease afterwards. Write in the margins, let your mind wander. Where do you go to? This is an example of some of the notes that I made on Seth Godin's new book, The Practice. I knew that I was going to be excuse me, interviewing Seth. So I made points and notes on questions that I would want to come back to, and it made it much easier when I was then revisiting the text to work out what it was that I was interested to know more of from Seth. I should say, do make sure you do it in pencil, because you might just go up in flames if you write on a book in pen. That is a step too far. But underlining, annotating, jotting down ideas as you're reading will allow you to more concretely understand the words that you're reading and begin to create that action list that you'll then be able to apply to your own circumstances. By arriving with a pencil, you're prepared to come up with ideas, and your mind will be more willing to oblige. So finally, step 4 for turning your reading into a summary, into an action list, is to write a summary. At the end of reading and annotating those 2 chapters, you should ideally be able to draw out 1 to 2 sentences on what the book is saying. Give yourself time immediately afterwards to do this. It's very easy to kind of finish up a book, finish a text you're reading, and just close it and go on about with your day. But if you immediately after finishing reading, kind of write down your conclusion, your personal conclusion of what the book is about and how the principles can be applied to your situation, you'll then be able to revisit it a little bit later when you've had time to think on it, and you'll be able to see really clearly what it is that you want to do on your objective. So you could also, if you don't fancy writing it down, you could also kind of create a little elevator pitch to tell a colleague why they should read the book, but you want to be doing something that can fit into about 30 seconds. And then the basis of that can then form your action list. So a quick example of this at work is Dan Heath's book, Upstream, which came out earlier this year. Dan is one of the Heath brothers who wrote the book The Power of Moments, and I read Upstream in February, made about 6 pages of six pages of a Word document of notes, and then didn't touch it again for 6 months. And then back in September, I decided to revisit Upstream and applied my new tactic of reading just the first and last chapters. And here are the notes that I made. So on the left here, you can see a little snippet of the 6-page notes that I made. From this point downwards, it's just quotes that are copied verbatim from the text. And on the right, here is my kind of 45-second summary of what Upstream is about. And on first glance, you can see that there is detail missing on the right-hand side. But when you actually look at the key words that I've written, there is a much more concentration on those key points in my second summary. So actually, the remaining 5 pages of text, the quotes verbatim, weren't of much use to me. I was just probably writing them out to make myself feel like I was understanding the text. So the reason I picked up Upstream for a second time was because I was having a problem, and it was because I was finding myself falling behind on the books that I needed to read for our book club members. My to read pile was ever growing. I was in a really amazing position where I was getting sent new books every day, but I just couldn't really work out how I was ever going to catch up on my reading. And with that in mind, I decided to reread the first and last chapters of Upstream, which is a book about how you can reduce problems from occurring downstream by tackling the source upstream. And we can tend to overlook the bigger picture sometimes and instead focus on our personal objectives and goals. And for me, a goal has always been to read a book cover to cover and add it to my reading total on Goodreads, as I say, to get that buzz of adding to that total. And that is okay. It is natural to want to feel like we're achieving something. But in order to spend less of my time firefighting, I found that actually I could reframe the way that I was approaching learning from these books, and I'd be able to get through more of them. Effectively, I could change the way that I was reading. So I analysed what I'd done to glean the key info from Upstream, and that was the 4 tactics that I've shared with you today. These are my notes, kind of an example of my notes from Upstream. As you can see, lots of very bad drawings in the margins, but that's the way my mind works. But so those 4 tactics I shared with you today, they might not work for you, but I'd urge you to give them a go. And most importantly, to reframe the way that you view learning from books. you're not reading the books for anyone but yourself. So why read them in a way that suits other people more than it suits you? I would advise you to read the first and last chapter exclusively, come to those 2 chapters with a clear objective or problem in mind, bring a pencil and let the ideas flow, and summarize what the book was saying. You'll be able to see you kind of apply the concepts in more business and marketing books and see your personal and professional growth skyrocket. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Isabelle. That was great. I mean, I can say personally that you've encouraged me to read loads more this year than I've ever read before, I think. You've summarized things really well there, but I will press you for an extra 15 seconds. If you could sum up the message you want people to take away from your talk today at Clarity at Speed Live, how would you do it?
So I would say that you can be a more effective reader and get more from business and marketing books by only focusing on reading the first and last chapters, having a specific problem or scenario in mind whilst reading, making notes, and writing yourself a 1 to 2 sentence summary afterwards, which can form the focus for your action list on the problem that you're trying to solve, and then rinse and repeat.
There we are. And how can people join the Journey Further book club to find out more about all these business books which you speak about?
Absolutely. So you can get in touch with me anytime here on isabelle@journeyfurther.com. But the best way to find out what's going on with the book club is to sign up. It's free to join. There's a link there. We're at journeyfurther.com/book club. And you'll be joining a community of nearly 1,500 marketers, founders, and CEOs who all, like you, want to continue learning and tackling our industry's biggest problems and questions whilst developing personally. So yeah, check us out there on the website and find us on Twitter and LinkedIn, Instagram. We're on all of them. Just search for Journey Further and you'll find us there.
All of them.
All
cool.
of them. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Isabelle. Thank you very much for that. I can see in the comments there's lots of people finding that really interesting and useful. So yeah, thanks again.
Cool. Thanks, Nate.
So moving on now, our next talk at 3:00, I will be interviewing Sharmadean Reid, who is the CEO of Beautystack. Really interesting, pioneering business, disrupting the beauty industry. But Sharmadean herself has views much broader than that about business, about empowerment, so much more. So stay tuned. Do share this link around on social, in your Slack, send it around to your team. We've got 4 great talks coming up this afternoon. And as I say, 3:00, we'll have Sharmadean Reid joining us. See you soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Clarity at Speed Live. Thank you for sticking with us through this afternoon session. We've got some great talks still to come. I'm really excited for the next 15 minutes to be joined by Sharmadean Reid, MBE from Beautystack. Hello, Sharmadean.
Hi, Nathan. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Awesome.
I just want to kick things off, I guess, for context, people who might not be aware of Beautystack. Can you give a little bit of background to what you guys do and how that is disrupting the beauty industry?
So Beautystack is social media meets booking platform. So the idea came from the fact that I had a nail salon, War Nails, which was incredibly popular. We would get a lot of screenshots from people off our Instagram feed being like, how much is this? How long did it take? And I always thought, wouldn't it be cooler if you could literally click and book the picture? So rather than approach a booking marketplace in a directory fashion, which means a list of services, a list of providers, I was like, imagine if you use the network effects of recommendations, visuals, what your friends are having, what other people are booking to recommend you the best treatment for you.
No, and when you explain it like that, it makes complete sense. And I guess that the theme for this interview is empowering change. When did you have that spark in your mind that you thought, you know what, actually, I've spotted a problem here. I'm just going to take it upon myself to change this in the industry and do something like it's not been done before?
I think that I've always had within me a way of seeing how things could be different. So it might have been something really simple like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the dining hall at school was laid out differently for communication? Or it might be like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a better way of organizing software and menu items? But then when I can see it different, I feel the urge to do it. I'm like, if I don't do it, who else will? So I think it's like, it's that thing for me personally, which I'd have this niggling feeling of being like, I have to do it because who else is going to do it?
That's right. And I think, as you say, often the best ideas are the ones that are kind of niggling away at you. What would you say has been the biggest or the most sort of unexpected challenge so far with Beautystack? Now you're sort of 3 years in, right?
The whole thing has been a challenge. No, unexpected. All the challenges I'm having at the moment are challenges that I knew I would be having, considering that I'm a non-technical, non-finance, non-software person building and running a technology in a software company. I knew it would be challenging. But what I didn't expect was how much my own inner personality, strength, my inner authenticity would be swayed by the industry around me. It can be very, very challenging working in a super fast-paced environment where there's always a hot new thing, where you always will have doubters and naysayers. I never expected how much that would affect me as part of the process of this journey.
Because I watched your TED talk, I think it was, where you talked about you learning how to use Photoshop and InDesign, because you were just like, I'm just going to do it myself. I'm not going to wait for someone else to do it for me, or I'm not going to wait for a graphic designer to try and get this right. It seems like you have quite a fearless approach to getting things done.
I think you would say fearless. I'd say naive. I think that it's almost like childlike naivety of not knowing what's risky, what's impossible, what might hurt you. That type of naivety is actually what's held me in good stead, because I kind of acted without knowing what the repercussions might be like or what failure might look like. So yeah, I definitely have a can-do attitude, but the more you know, the less you're inclined to do it.
And obviously now you're growing a business, you've got lots of people working with you at Beautystack. How do you marry up, obviously, your own, I say fearlessness, you may say naivety, that own way of working, and how do you bring a whole team on a journey with you to think like that as well?
I think the most important skill an entrepreneur can develop, if they don't have it innately, is storytelling, because you have to tell this story, bring everybody on the journey with you, from your team, investors, the press, the public. So for me, the way I always do that is through storytelling and context. I think it's really important for you to be able to say, my role as a CEO is to look at everything that's going on, take my experience, my intel, and figure out what the right direction for the company is. And that's, when you, rather than just tell someone, here's what we should be doing, giving them context, story, and I write a memo. I will always write a little memo if there's a direction we need to do. And that way, you help your team members understand the why, not just the what.
That's really interesting. And yeah, and how do you manage yourself against that why and the what? How do you strike a balance in your leadership between obviously being that spokesperson and that storyteller, and being that person who evidently wants to be doing the do and getting involved with so many things at the same time?
I think it's important as you progress in your career to change your methods to working smarter, not harder. So I definitely enjoy doing the doing, and I also love knowing how it's done, even if I don't do it myself. But I also understand the importance of hiring people better than you at the thing that they're going to be doing, and giving them the space and trust to get on and do it. I think as long as you've set the strategy and the vision for the change that you want to see in the world, and you hire the best team to execute on it, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to micromanage or dip in on everything being done. Another thing I do is I have my own personal vision, mission, principles. So for how I want to operate as a human, right? So if I feel a bit out of shape, like mentally or worn down, it tends to be because I'm operating against my personal principles. So then I have to realign with those and then bring them back into the company, into what I'm doing all of the on a daily basis.
Can you share those at all, or what is an example of one of your principles?
So a principle I have is around, let me think of one, focus, because my brain, I have real bad shiny new object syndrome. I will suddenly get curious about something and put all of my attention onto it. And if somebody asks me to do something, I will be like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do it. But because my vision is around gender equality and my mission is to use technology and media to advance gender equality, if I'm asked to do anything outside of that, I have to focus and say no. So it might be, for example, I believe we're going to advance gender equality through technology with the app, through media, with the content we make. But let's say someone asks me to do a teaching position, at a university. I'd have to say no, because education is not one of those things. It's technology and media. But in the next 5 years, it might be education and politics, or it might be literature and music. The mission changes, but the vision doesn't, right? The vision is, my life goal is to be instrumental in advancing gender equality. The mission by which I'm doing it is through technology, and the way I'm going to carry myself is with focus, authenticity, and they're like these 10 principles about how I'm going to operate.
That's so interesting. So like a really solid but a flexible framework that can adapt as things move forwards. I wanted to ask you a little bit then. You obviously, and as you've alluded to there about gender equality, you speak very passionately about being a female founder and the challenges which that entails. Can you speak a bit about why it's so important for you to be spreading that message and waving that flag?
I only like to talk about the things that I know and understand, or rather the process by me understanding it is by sharing. So does that make sense? So by me teaching something, it's actually helping me process it myself, or by me talking about something, I'm processing it and, you know, baking the knowledge in for myself. So it's a combination of like selfishness in that I want to understand it and I understand it by sharing it, but also I think what is important for men and women to understand is that there might be policies, company policies, you know, legal in law that might seem that they're working towards gender equality, but there are all of these other things that are critical in figuring out why we have this gap, particularly in pay, right? The pay gap is the most like the important thing for me. So when you share your experience, you're helping illuminate those inconsistencies between what people think is happening with gender equality and what is actually happening, you know? So for example, it might be like, well, we founded 4 female companies this year, which is a, you know, 50% increase on last year. But if those female founders don't have equal network support, access to partners, you know, access to quality talent, you know, all the things around it, then the data around the funding is irrelevant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to like really scrape back from the surface level of what people pursue as equality or equal opportunity.
That's so interesting. So like you speaking about the challenges from a process of like you personally actually processing them and dealing with them and trying to understand them. I guess in a way that makes it quite, your message quite relatable though. It makes it almost gives you more reach and more cut through because you're doing it in such a human way.
Yeah, but that reach and cut through isn't like the most important thing for me. As you can probably tell from the way I'm talking now, I can be very convoluted and, you know, overcomplicated. And I could say things a lot more snappily and simply if I wanted like millions of people to understand it or I wanted it to be viral. It's not about the reach because I don't need, like, putting something out there is enough for me. Putting something out there, and this is the challenge that I've got like with me scaling a business, is I don't get a lot of validation from the feedback. I get the validation from the creation. So it's almost like I've just hired a marketing person. She'll be really excited about, oh my goodness, we got more users. We got like 50% growth this month. Da, da, da. Do you know what I mean? But that bit doesn't excite me as much. I'm like, wow, we made an app. Like, that's amazing. And the creation is sufficient for me.
Oh, that's really interesting. We're coming towards the end of the interview now. I wanted to ask you a bit of an open question. From all of your experience, and I guess how you see the world of business and the lay of the land today, what advice would you give to a young person wanting to start their first business today?
If you want to start your first business today, nail the business model, because if you can successfully execute a business model, for example, franchising or subscriptions or membership, it doesn't matter what you sell, but the distribution and the business model has to be the key thing.
I think that makes complete sense. I guess we can get caught up these days with the world of startups and big raising big rounds of funding that a lot of the fundamentals of making a profit can often go by the wayside.
Exactly. Just how are you going to make money and how are you going to distribute it?
Sharmadean, I wish we could speak for so much longer. Maybe we'll get the chance to do that at some point. But to wrap up the interview today, I've just got to ask you for your 15-second summary. If you could give people just a 15-second thing to take away when it comes to empowerment or being a leader, what would that be?
My big takeaway is to constantly be learning and reflecting on your actions. It's essentially exist, reflect, improve.
Exist, reflect, improve. No, that makes complete sense, Sharmadean. Sharmadean, thank you so much for speaking to me. That 15 minutes has absolutely flown by. It looks like there's been some great response in the chat as well. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharmadean. There we go. And thank you to everyone who is still tuned in on YouTube and LinkedIn. We just have, I want to say, 3 more talks, I'd be correct, to go. Coming up at 3:30, we have Jonny Longden, who is the conversion director here at Journey Further. And he is going to be diving into some digital strategy thinking. I think you'll be really impressed with what Jonny's got to share. He certainly thinks about things in a very different way to other people and communicates things with real clarity. So I look forward to that. That'll be coming up in about 14 minutes time. So if you're on the YouTube or LinkedIn, keep this tab open. And yes, we'll be back very shortly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clarity at Speed Live. If this is the first talk that you've tuned in to today, just to give you a very quick overview, we've had 15-minute talks happening throughout the day today, hearing from all sorts of people from the likes of Social Chain, Seth Godin, Bruce Daisley, Starling Bank, and we've got a few more great talks to come still. So coming up now to join me is Jonny Longden. Hello, Jonny. How are you doing?
Hi, Nathan. Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you.
So Jonny is the conversion director at Journey Further. He heads up that side of the business. And yeah, I'm excited to hand over to Jonny to talk you through a bulletproof framework for your digital strategy.
Thank you very much. Great. Thanks, Nathan. Right. Thank you very much, everybody who's attended, and good afternoon. Just very, very quick intro to me. I'm the Experimentation and Performance Consulting Director of Journey Further. I run the conversion team. I have a long history in experimentation, conversion, optimization, digital analytics, and digital strategy with agencies, management consultancies, and client side with the likes of Sky and Visa. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, so if you don't follow me already, please feel free to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. So I'm talking to you today about digital strategy, and I guess digital strategy means different things to different people. And coming from my background, which is generally all about optimization and continuous improvement, strategy to me only really makes sense when it's driving action and when it's changing behavior at the day-to-day level in business. So strategy is really, number one, an articulation of the direction of your business, and really that's about how you're going to make profit and how you're going to make money, and that should trickle down into how you measure what you're doing. And that's both how you measure whether or not you're achieving that strategy, but also the kinds of data that you use in order to understand opportunities, in order to improve things. And that then should align very closely to concretely what you're actually doing. And that can sound a little bit obvious, but it'll become a bit more apparent as I show you how we go about doing that. So the first part is about articulating your business strategy, which is articulating a profit strategy. And really, that's very unique to each business. What it's about is saying, how are you going to make profit? What are the levers that you need to pull in terms of both revenue and cost that is going to deliver profit margin? And that will give you a very unique view of the focus and the type of activity that you need to deliver in things like marketing, merchandising, fulfillment, whatever, depending on the type of a business. Now, it's quite remarkable how many businesses haven't really been through this process, or if they have, they don't really share it and communicate it within the business and don't live and breathe it. And so what you find is that you might have a marketing team who will really be working to something fairly generic, like driving revenue or delivering traffic to a website or something like that. But if that was to be based on a proper profit strategy, it might be slightly different. So, for example, you might be driving margin by selling products at a particularly high rate. So you've got a high markup on products, which you justify through certain aspects of branding, the premium nature of how you sell those products, customer service, that sort of stuff. And so if that is your profit strategy, then, and that trickles down to what you're doing, then your marketing team should know from a Marcom's perspective that it's all about premium. It's all about driving and justifying a high price. You might put a very, very high focus on service, etc. Similarly, a totally different profit strategy would be one that would sell at a low rate and deliver a load of efficiency through your supply chain. And so you might put a lot of effort on the supply chain fulfillment and things like that. So how you describe that and how you articulate it should trickle down into concretely what you're doing. And I'm going to show you a framework for how to do that. But it's based on a fictitious example of a company, which I'm calling Acme Kitchen Goods. So just to put into your mind what I'm kind of imagining here. So imagine this company, Acme Kitchen Goods, direct, manufacture, and sell kitchen utensils and small appliances. And historically, they've done that through third parties, both physical retail and online, like Amazon, Argos, John Lewis, whoever. However, they have gradually developed a very strong brand recognition because the products are incredibly good and people know them. And so they've launched their own website and are ultimately driving people to a direct-to-consumer model. Now, they potentially realized that that's really good for them, that's a high-margin way of selling because there's a cost per acquisition benefit to selling like that, and there's also a lifetime value benefit because they get to have the relationship with the customer. So the starting point of their profit strategy is to push the direct-to-consumer model, which is because it's better from a margin point of view. And so the first thing that we do is try and articulate how that works, literally mechanically, how that works from a profit perspective. And profit is a product of both revenue and cost. And revenue can come from either new acquisition, from increasing the value of existing customers, or retaining customers. And cost is largely a product of both marketing and sales cost and operating cost. So if we look at those mechanics and we think, based on that overarching strategy, what are the levers that we can pull? We might say that customer acquisition is very specifically needs to focus on outbidding and outranking third parties. So if somebody searches for one of their products and what they see is them, John Lewis, Amazon, Argos, and various other suppliers, then the whole strategy needs to focus on being more compelling, more visible, and more clickable than those of the third parties, because ultimately you're trying to displace those third-party retailers. Another acquisition strategy would be that organic and social plays a big part, because if you can develop a loyal brand following, then there's a lot of organic stuff that you can do in reducing the cost of marketing. Customer value, the opportunity of the direct-to-consumer platform means that they should be able to upsell and add on things as people are buying things and sell more to them through relationship marketing. And retention happens when you start to develop a relationship as well through perhaps content marketing. And the cost is reduced because you're not discounting wholesale, and also your cost of marketing should come down as you develop more of a loyal base. And operating cost comes from the fact that you own the supply chain. So these are the levers that you can pull in order to deliver against that profit strategy. However, you can't really go out and overtly try and make profit because ultimately, what you're trying to do is deliver a customer experience and deliver something helpful for customers. So really the framework is flipped on its head and is based on much more of a customer-centric set of objectives. And this is the starting point of the wider framework, which I'll come on to. But here, this starts to look more like a traditional marketing funnel. And this can be unique to whatever it is you're trying to do. But, you need to attract people. You need to get them to actually come to the website. You need to give them information about the product and inform them what it is that you do, convert them, actually deliver and fulfill that product or experience, and then nurture them somehow. And this is where you start to have to really properly align that profit strategy. So as attracting customers, what I've put here is, we're trying to kind of think, what does the customer need to think and feel? I know and desire the product and specifically wish to purchase it direct because I understand the unique benefit. Now you start to see here that what we're doing is ultimately trying to kind of really map down from that profit strategy how whatever happens underneath that pillar works. If you were, worst case scenario, if you were to just say, right, we need to attract people to the website, you would go out and start driving traffic to the website. But if you're not specifically thinking of that direct customer benefit vis-a-vis third-party retail, then you are not delivering against that profit strategy. Connect, the website of the landing the landing experience on the website should be persuasive and compelling, but it also needs to communicate effectively the USPs of buying direct, because somebody will have already been to a third party or at least seen that it's available from a third party. So that is a very strong comms objective of the landing experience of the website. You inform people about the product, sell the product, but you need to cross-sell. So you need to be selling other products. So So that becomes a real sort of mechanical, functional aspect of how UX works. Conversion, again, you have to add on things through the process. So that needs to be how your checkout works. Delivery needs to be a great experience. It needs to be better than the third party. And then nurturing is obviously all about loyalty. So these are the things that you have to really, really kind of almost paint on the wall and keep in mind as you're actually operating things. And that leads on to this specific framework. And this is really the kind of crescendo, which is this is how a framework works. Now, remember, what we're doing is we're trying to understand the different objectives and the different parts of the flow and experience that a customer should go through, how you measure whether or not you're achieving those things, and ultimately then how you drive action. So the second two rows down here are a set of measures that are specifically trying to answer that question that you see at the top. And then what are the actual concrete things that you're gonna optimize or improve or do? And those, in a big organization, you might literally have different people owning those different things. But at the end of the day, those are the things you are focusing on. So as a concrete example, just to bring it all to light, and I'm not going to go through this in a whole load of detail, but in that attract phase, we've already defined that what we need to do is be more compelling than third parties and to get people to understand why they should buy direct. So your Marcoms then have that objective. The Marcoms objective is not just selling the awareness and belief in the product, but it's selling the benefit of direct, and that has to come through all of your marketing communications. But more importantly, when you get into the realm of paid media, and here's the nub of it really. So if you don't think about all this and you go out and you hire a PPC agency, then that PPC agency is going to start working to something like return on ad spend or ROI or even clicks or traffic or whatever. And that completely forgets the profit strategy that you've devised. If they're measuring, for example, share of search versus third-party retail. So if you're able to say, to what extent are we appearing above third-party retail in the searches that happen, then that is delivering against your profit strategy, which is about displacing third-party retail. So you're measuring and optimizing to something different that is standard because of your unique profit strategy. And that's going to inform how you do paid media. Another specific example in the inform pillar here. Obviously, what we've said is what's really important is that we're not just selling the product. Selling the product should be driving add to basket, but you also need to add stuff on. You need to be upselling attachments, things like add-ons, maybe not relevant for this product, but extended warranties, whatever. So upsell attachment would be a specific metric which is aligned to your profit strategy, which you can then optimize and improve as a specific thing. You might then go further and say, well, we specifically want them to attach high margin products, where you might create something like profit index, which is basically a measure of how profitable the products are that people are adding on. And that should trickle into your merchandising, upsell, and also the user experience of navigating and going through the site. And that is completely different from literally just optimizing conversion. If you were to just optimize conversion or sales or something like that, you are forgetting that profitability element, because the profitability aspect of it doesn't necessarily come into what you see on a standard basis. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this, and we're nearly out of time, but that's really the point of it. Is you've got to align and go from, as a starting point and a very top-down process, what does profit mean? What's your direction? How are you going to deliver it? Then how do you measure those things in a meaningful way? And very importantly, you have to start thinking, don't worry about the data that you've got. If you worry about the data that you've got, you'll measure what you can. Think, what do we need to measure? What's the ideal thing to measure? And then find the best possible way of doing that. Because otherwise, you're going to be dictated by the data rather than what your profit strategy is. And then ultimately, how do you drive that into behavior and action within the organization that is aligned to those things? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonny. That was great. I've just got one question for you before I'm going to ask you for your 15-second summary. And I guess, do you find from your experience that it's just typically sort of smaller companies who haven't figured this stuff out, or is it some of the biggest retailers out there who don't have this stuff well defined either.
I think, like I say, you know, sometimes people haven't really defined it that well, but more often than not, it's done in a kind of an annual strategy deck or something like that, which you know, very senior people understand, but it isn't communicated and executed throughout the organization very well. And so, just like I say, you know, you've got people in the marketing team driving traffic when actually that is, you know, it is an important thing, but it's not what's delivering against profit strategy. So I think, you know, the point of that framework is that it's about everybody who is working on those things, who has the power to affect that change, understanding and aligning to that profit strategy and knowing what it is they're supposed to deliver.
That makes sense. So Jonny, if you could summarize this framework in 15 seconds for hopefully to inspire someone to take it away, how would you do that?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, your business exists for a reason, and that reason is to be successful, and being successful is about profit. And how you do that is very unique to your business. You've got a lot of decisions to make about how you're going to make profit. But then if you don't follow that through, and you've got somebody that is in charge of actually delivering and executing against marketing or fulfillment or whatever, and they're not working to the same thing, then what was the point? So it's really about aligning everybody, getting everybody on the same page, and making sure everybody works towards your objective.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you so much, Jonny, for taking the time to share that with us.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So there we have it. That was Jonny Longden with a bulletproof framework for your digital strategy. We've got 2 more talks coming up. Next up at 4 o'clock is Marisa Thomas. So Marisa is the head of brand at Bloom & Wild, the flower delivery company. But over the past year or so, she has also been heading up their thoughtful marketing movement, which is all about trying to see a bit past the data points and actually start to think about customers as people, not just as consumers. There's a really interesting story about how it came about, which I'm sure Marissa's going to share. And there's tons of really insightful, actionable stuff, which I'm sure anyone could implement into their marketing or brand strategy. So that is coming up at 4 o'clock, Marisa from Bloom & Wild. So sit tight on the stream. Do share this on your LinkedIn or your Twitter to get more people involved and join the conversation. And yeah, I will see you in about 12 or 13 minutes time. Hello, everyone. And for those of you just tuning in, welcome to Clarity at Speed Live. It's 4:00, and that means I can be incredibly excited to invite our next speaker to the virtual stage. So I first spoke with Marisa Thomas a few months ago for the podcast. And what she's going to speak about today, I think, is something which is not considered anywhere near enough by marketers, by brand people, by business people. An incredibly interesting topic, which I think you'll all enjoy. Marisa is the head of brand at Bloom and Wild. Here she is. Hello, Marisa. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy what Marisa has got to share with us today. So, Marisa, over to you.
Great, thanks. Cool. So I'm going to be talking about what thoughtfulness can do for your brand. But before I do that, I thought I would just start by introducing myself in a way that us as marketers are introduced to our customers. So the best way to do that is probably to talk about what's most important about me, according to what Google knows about me. So I'm 18 to 44 years old. Apparently, I'm interested in American football, along with cats and corner shops, which was news to me, but that's what's most important for you to know about me. However, if I happen to be browsing the internet and using a different email address, I do have some different interests, and actually I become a little bit of a different person. So depending on which account I'm looking at and how I'm using the internet, I might actually be 25 to 34 years old, which is getting closer. I no longer like cats, I like dogs, but corner shops are apparently still a passion of mine. And interestingly, apparently I'm interested in parenting, which is, again, news to me. And the reason I'm sharing this is that I think often when we think about our customers or our audience, what we're really thinking about is demographics or the things that we know about them that can help us send the right ads to them or push the right products to them. And what that's led to is that, like, when we talk about customer first, often what we're really saying is data-led. Now, being data-led isn't a problem at all, and that's not like what the enemy is. The problem is, I don't think we're actually being customer first. So this is what I mean, right? We talk about customer first, or we talk about our audience, and we start to talk about them in these really kind of broken down, granular, segmented ways, their age graphics, their fields of study, what type of homes they have, the generation that they're in, all of these things which help us get content to them that we want to talk about rather than asking them what they want to hear about. And that doesn't feel customer first to me. But sometimes we can be a bit better than that. So we take this data-led approach in order for us to kind of get great performance. And then we say, but we're also going to listen. But what we mean by that is that we'll listen, but only when it's easy. So here's a great example. This is a tweet from yesterday. Someone's tweeted Bloom and Wild, and they've just let us know that they absolutely love the tiny tree that they received from their friends. However, it was missing a spare bit of soil, and the instructions that we sent them were wrong. Now, what we'll do is react to that and say, right, we've got to be really customer first. This person has come to us with a problem about our product. We can fix this. And the conversation might go something like, cool, let's check in with the warehouse and make sure this isn't a bigger issue. And we'll congratulate ourselves and say, great, we're being customer first. Go team. We're really listening to our customer. But the reality is we're not really listening to our customer. It's just someone has alerted us to a problem, and it's one that's easy to fix. And there's resource to fix it because we think it might be a wider issue that affects many customers and is to do specifically with our product. So that, again, doesn't feel customer first. We're waiting for the issue to come to us. Sometimes we go a bit further than that. So then we say, okay, we need to listen in order to understand where the issues are. We need to be data-led in order for our ads to perform. But we also need to get insights, and that's how we can truly get towards the customer. But often then what happens is what we really truly mean when we're talking about insights is we're talking about being results-led or results-driven. And this is kind of the way that it could happen. So you have a company insight that you frame as a customer insight, something that says, hey, if we change X in the checkout flow, turns out revenue per visitor increases by X. And then that's followed by a conversation which is like, great, let's find more places to optimize. And somehow all of that gets framed in this idea of being customer first and thinking about the behaviors of customer and therefore being a champion of them. I'm not trash talking any of these methods. It's all really important. The problem is, what about what our customers want? That question doesn't get asked. Often customer first is just about how we can understand how they behave to make them convert quicker or make them do something for us quicker. And it doesn't create a relationship. It's quite self-serving. And if it was a true relationship, we would be a really selfish friend. So what I wanted to kind of talk about today, and then share an example of how at Bloom & Wild we've started to think about this idea of thoughtfulness, is by starting with a fact that I'm sure we all know to be true and connecting it to the relationships that we have in our day-to-day lives. And that's that people don't always say what they're thinking. And I feel like I can pretty confidently say that, knowing that we all know it to be true, because most of us have probably been in this situation where we've gone to a hairdresser's, they've held up that strange mirror behind your head, and you've kind of just nodded and said, yeah, looks great, thanks. And you don't like the haircut, you don't want to tell them, you leave the hairdresser's, and something happens, which is the hairdresser is none the wiser. They think that their client is happy. You might have even still tipped them. So they don't know that there's an issue. And you walk away knowing that you're probably not going to return to that hairdresser again. Or if you do, you're not going to choose that hairdresser specifically. So there's a breakdown in communication. And though it's never explicitly said, something has happened. And it's very hard to understand that the missing piece was that there wasn't a conversation or honesty going on. There was no intention from the hairdresser to truly try and get what the real feedback is. And then as the customer, you kind of don't want the awkwardness of having to let them know. If you think about it in the broader context of digital marketing, I think this happens all the time. And if you're just thinking about you're scrolling through your inbox and how we think about email communications as just one example, the way that we measure it is solely focused on getting somebody to do the ultimate action for us as a brand or a business, which typically is some form of conversion, be that a sale or a sign up, whatever it is that we want them to do. And we completely ignore the fact that we know and we're aware that people are opening emails, the content within it is not relevant to them, and they're not doing anything with that. And somehow we accept that as being kind of part of the data that we don't really need to pay attention to because we're focused on the conversion, rather than thinking about what else could we be speaking to those customers about in order to stop having these moments where people are kind of receiving bad haircuts time and time again, things that aren't relevant to them, and they're not telling us because it's not made their life infinitely worse, but it hasn't made their connection with you and your company any stronger. And I think the way that we've got here is through this addiction to data that we have. And data is something that we all know to be super important, and within the digital marketing context has allowed us to become more efficient, to create great products and experiences for our customers, but also to chase specific metrics aligned to a funnel and not really think about the broader context of how you're building a relationship with your customer and your brand. And that's kind of where this seed of this idea of thoughtfulness started to come into play at Bloom & Wild. So the question within all of this is that if you're chasing purely kind of getting someone down the funnel or trying to retain them, and these metrics and the data and what demographics and perform best for you and what geographies do you need to kind of focus on, are you really building a brand if your customer only matters to you when they're ready to purchase? I think this is a question that it's a shame that we're not all in a room together, because I think in the context of the last 6 months, I reckon we've all been thinking about this a lot more. There are a lot of customers that, for whatever reason, in bigger swarms of groups and cohorts than normally, have been made redundant or furloughed and are therefore less able to shop with you. And we've realised that there's still a place for brands to be part of their lives. So I want to share an example, as I've kind of alluded to this idea of thoughtfulness, and with that kind of context of the behaviour that has kind of come to be, particularly with digital first brands, or within like the marketing rooms that we all sit in. And And a couple of years ago, our customer delight team had a couple of people call in, a few people email in and ask to unsubscribe from our emails in March. And because they had specifically reached out to us rather than just clicking unsubscribe, we were able to ask them, what's the reason? Like, why do you want to unsubscribe? And it turned out throughout March, we spend 4 weeks emailing customers about Mother's Day. And for some people, that's simply not relevant to them. Either they don't have a mother because they've passed away, it's not relevant to them, they don't celebrate it, they don't have a relationship with their mum, or they do have a relationship with their mum, but they don't really want to shop for Mother's Day for them, or they don't want to buy them flowers. And all of these things were existing, but we were ignoring it because the objective and our goal was to sell flowers for Mother's Day. That's what a flower business does during March. But we started to think about this handful of customers, and really when we dug into it, we started to realize a handful of customers have told us, have reached out to us and kind of told us they've had a bad haircut, and that reminding them about Mother's Day was so painful that they felt they needed to reach out to us directly and tell us the reasons why. So they'd stopped listening to us. And when you think about that in the broader context and the fact that most people don't speak up, we started to think like this may be happening to more people than we realize. So it got us to a point of actually thinking about a customer insight, and it was simple. Some people don't have mums. So that was the starting point when we realized that we were getting these calls through, and we wanted to think about how we could do something to improve that experience for our customer. So the first step to that was to have a conversation with the marketing teams, the tech teams, and figure out the trading teams and figure out if we were able to allow customers to opt out of emails about Mother's Day. And then we took it a step further, and I think this is where thoughtfulness comes in. It's the first step is this act, which allows them to not have the painful experience. But then we thought, how about we speak to them about relevant things instead? So if we have a month where Mother's Day isn't relevant to customers, that's still a month where we could be having conversations with them or potentially selling things to them. So what we did, and this is a few years ago, and there's loads of companies that have done this since, was to send out a really simple email that just said, if you don't want to hear about Mother's Day, click here, we'll sort it out for you, and you'll still receive emails from us. You'll get the same offers, everything will be like normal. You just won't get that reminder, all that content that's about something that just doesn't matter to you. The result of that was quite incredible. And the first year that we did it, we sent it out on a Sunday. We weren't expecting it to get great pickup, and that was never the intention. But the reason I share this is because some of the sentiment that was coming through was really amazing. It was people saying that they had never heard of us before, but they'd heard about what we'd done and they will choose us for Mother's Day. And then there were other people that were really thanking us for making it a little bit less painful for them when their inbox is inundated with painful reminders about an occasion that they don't want to know about. And that kind of mood was picked up as well. Like press were talking about it. It felt like something that was so simple, because if you were really thinking about a relationship, you would ask a friend if they liked fish before you cook them fish for dinner, or you would ask them like what their preference is before you go and do something. And it seemed like actually people were really surprised that businesses could do that or have that relationship with their customers where they bothered to say like, hey, is this okay with you? And it not just be when it's mandated because it's about ticking a box to say that you're willing to accept emails. It's about saying which ones you want to hear. It went further. It ended up being talked about in Parliament, discussed in a conversation around kind of grief counselling and ways that us as marketers in the advertising industry, whether they should accept responsibility for these triggering moments, emails, promotions, shop windows, and really started to pick up in the national conversation. And if we go back to the starting point, or the enemy that maybe I set up at the start, which is this kind of data-led approach, if you really think about it, that handful of customers, it's like less than a percentage point of our customers were reaching out to us saying they had this issue. And if we were solely focused on that one primary objective of selling flowers at Mother's Day, it's us doing this or not wouldn't have affected our sales. But we wanted to make sure that we were doing something that wasn't harmful and was actually making sure we were building a good relationship with customers that previously we were essentially saying, we don't care about you if you don't have a mum, because the only customers we want are Mother's Day customers in March. So we shifted that thinking. The first year, 18,000 people opted out, and that was more than we expected. We were really surprised by that. 18,000 bad haircuts saved. But we continued, and the next year, we kind of thought about how we could do this in more ways. So we now have a preference center where people can elect what occasions they want to hear about and which ones they don't. And if they're opted out of Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, any of the kind of occasions that are relevant to our business and that we know that we talk about a lot, we make sure that their experience across not just their inbox, but their site experience with us means that they'll never see navigation or products that remind them of that occasion. So again, thinking thoughtfully about how we can make this as nice an experience for our customers that don't buy at these important times for us as a business, so that we maintain that relationship with them. 162,000 customers are now opted out of Mother's Day emails. And then there are tens of thousands not opted out across other occasions as well. So that's quite incredible. And I think to flip it back to what it does for us as a business, beyond building trust and loyalty and kind of living our values, it also allows us to speak to 162,000 customers that were shutting off and not listening to us for the whole of March. So that's the kind of impact that thinking thoughtfully and thinking about your customers, even if they're a small minority voice, can do. And that led us to build upon that and create something called the Thoughtful Marketing Movement. So as I mentioned briefly, this is something that other companies have been doing as well. And each year we see more companies do it across occasions that make sense for them, specifically Mother's Day, as well as other big occasions, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, etc. So we set up a movement to kind of create a community of brands, and we've got 145 brands to date who one initially has signed up to committing to offering opt-out to their customers, to marketing more thoughtfully to them and allowing them to elect what they hear about. But secondary to that, we then kind of entered a whole new world, because we launched a thoughtful marketing movement in March this year, and then we entered lockdown. And we've been able to use this community of brands to think about, if we stop thinking about our business objectives only and how we can build this relationship with our customer so that they become more loyal rather than just trying to chase the direct response off of them, we can think about topics like how do we connect with them during a pandemic when things like payday emails may be more triggering. And then we moved into June and the Black Lives Matter conversations, and we were able to kind of host chats and forums with Davina, who was on here earlier today, along with a couple of other great people, to chat about how do we represent other communities that we're maybe not advocating for in our marketing. And so this idea of thoughtfulness really can expand into any realm that's relevant to your business and the marketing you're doing. And the underlying principle is about how you make it about a connection with a person and the customer, not the data point and the fact that they apparently like corner shops, American football, and dogs or cats, depending on what email they're using. And there's some reasons why this is important, and ways to back this up. So just to check a couple of stats out from various Edelman Trust Barometer reports, we know that consumers are increasingly looking for brands with heart. And that's backed up by things like 80% of consumers expect brands to make a positive social impact now. And that's huge. Ethical drivers are 3 times more important to brand trust versus competence. So things like getting your delivery right or your product not breaking, they're not as important as ethical drivers are. And sustainability, which I think within itself has loads of ways of kind of connecting to this idea of thoughtfulness. It's the 3rd reported key purchase driver for customers. So there's important reasons why, as a business, you start thinking about this idea of how to really get under what people care about versus what they're interested in that is connected to your business. And just to kind of round that off, and that I've given one example, which is, I guess, a big example of what we've done from a thoughtfulness perspective, which has managed to make us grow loyalty with our customers in a big way. But it's not a one-off campaign. So we really think of it as a pillar that helps you build better connections with your customers, and a pillar that we set up our business in the way that we operate internally. And ultimately, it helps you stay relevant and front of mind, whether your customers are shopping with you or not. So it does help the bottom line, because if you can find ways to think about what your customers care about and be part of their community, be part of their culture, even when they're not in the mood to shop with you, you can build a customer that's going to be more valuable to you over time. So 3 finishing points on how you can start to kind of implement thoughtfulness within your business, just to kind of round off this this thought. 3 areas. So the first one and the most important one, culture, internal culture. So making sure everybody in your company feels empowered to think thoughtfully. That example I shared, I think the most interesting point of it all is that our customer delight team felt empowered and able to speak to the marketing team, let them know, like, here is a handful of customers that have this problem. We should do something about this. And to date now we have things like an innovation council, which means that we've got a Slack channel. Anyone can put through an idea. We've got the mandate of how we can think more thoughtfully for our customers. And whenever someone spots something that could potentially be improved, whether it's about accessibility of our product or our site, or whether it's an email that's been triggering to a group of people, we're able to have that open forum and discussion so that anybody from the business is charged with keeping in touch with the customer and advocating for them. So then that second point is customer, taking your customers on the journey and really listening to the suggestions. I think we don't speak to the people that we're selling to anywhere near frequently enough, and you can do that in really simple ways. You don't need to like fork out money on research groups or like big fancy focus forums. If you've got a social media following, reach out to them on DMs and start to talk to them, or email your customers and have them join a private Facebook group and promise them that you will truly listen to them. It's something we've been doing a lot with our Facebook group at the moment. We're kind of getting feedback that sometimes can make us feel a little bit kind of nervous or sour, or you don't want to hear it. But we've kind of promised them that we'll listen to it and try and find ways to fix things, or let them know when it's actually something that we're not going to adjust right now. And then finally, comms, like once that culture and customer piece is done, making sure you have a 360 approach and leave no stone unturned. So that first example, in the first year, we just sent an email. The second year, we thought about our site experience and how we could make sure that we weren't reminding people within our navigation or our product descriptions. We're constantly thinking about how we're able to advertise during occasions like Mother's Day without actually mentioning Mother's Day, and do it in a way that's considerate to the minority of people that it won't be relevant to, while still celebrating the fact that there are a lot of people that do want to celebrate an occasion such as Mother's Day. And if you can kind of start to think about those 3 things and like mandate them under this principle of thoughtfulness, I think you just start to add an extra layer into your marketing, into your brand marketing, as well as your like direct response stuff that ties something closer to the customer values than just what demographics they sit in. And that's it. So that's my my kind of thought that I wanted to share with everybody. So thanks so much for listening. I really hope that there's something that you can take away from this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marisa. No, I think that you've really lifted the lid on such an interesting topic there. And I kind of, as you'd explained, not just an interesting topic, but like an incredible valuable business strategy if done well. And as you say, it can start with just one simple gesture, but develop into a whole stream of ideas around thoughtfulness and how to do a better job on that front. Now I need to get you to summarize everything you've said in 15 seconds. If you could get people to take away one thing from this talk and share it in just 15 seconds, what would it be?
You don't think of your friends as data, so don't think of your customers as data. Listen to them, be thoughtful. Wow. And that's probably 6 or 7 seconds. That is fantastic. Marisa, thank you again for joining us. I can see in the chat there's been a great response to that talk. So hopefully we'll see more people implementing thoughtfulness approaches in the months and years to come. Great. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thanks, Marisa. So there we have it. Marisa Thomas, I hope you enjoyed that one. Coming up in just 5 minutes time, we have the last talk of the day, which is going to be me interviewing Timothy Armu, who is the founder and CEO of a really exciting social media agency called Fanbytes. I'm going to be talking to Tim about how to reach Gen Z, about TikTok, about the Byte House, their TikTok house in London, and lots more. So that is coming up in 6 minutes time. Stay tuned. That's the last talk of the day. Please do keep the chat going on YouTube and on LinkedIn. It's great to get your feedback on these things. And yeah, I will see you very shortly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final talk of the day at Clarity at Speed Live. But it's certainly a case of last but not least, because I'm really excited to be joined by Tim Armu of Fanbytes. Hello, Tim. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I put on my Instagram story that today I've done 5 different talks, which is kind of crazy. So this is number 4. And later on, I'm doing one to New York, so it's fun.
Oh wow! Across the globe.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, just to kick things off, then, I've been following you guys for a while. I think Fanbytes was founded January 2017, the same time that Journey Further was. So it's been amazing to see your guys' growth. Can you just give a bit of brief background to Fanbytes and the kind of work you do for brands to kick us off?
Sure. So Fanbytes, we are the best place for brands to reach a Gen Z audience. So we have Fanbytes, the agency, where we run influencer campaigns and content campaigns on YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok for the world's biggest brands like the government, McDonald's, Deliveroo, Samsung, anyone and everyone. And then we have a talent business, Bite-Size Talent, where we exclusively rep the biggest talent in the UK. And then we have the Byte House, which is a new thing we came up with, which is like a owned and operated IP, which is a TikTok brand that we've built. So you have those 3 things there. You have the agency, software and services, you have the talent, and then you have this owned and operated IP, but they're like brought together by the idea that they all come together to help brands reach a Gen Z audience.
And I mean, the brands and the organizations you've mentioned there is so impressive. You guys obviously spotted a gap in the market to be able to offer these kind of services. What are the most crucial things which you're helping these brands understand when it comes to reaching Gen Z? What are the key strategies you're having to prove to them that, look, this is the approach you need to take in these modern times to reach this audience?
So say at the beginning where we started, so I started Fanbytes in university when I was doing my computer science degree. And I'd say there we had to talk a lot to brands about why it was important for you to reach this audience. So it wasn't so much that they didn't know. It was more like, okay, we know how this will play out in the next 5 years, but right now, how does it actually, drive results? How does me putting £1 in lead to £2? And so we then, now we have a wealth of case studies to pick from. So that's naturally a very easy conversation to have. I think that the biggest discussion point we have is more about how now do you create the content that gets people to then convert and to act and to buy your product. So it's more about how you create the content and then where you put the content, which tends to be the discussions that we're having with brands. And that is also like an internal thing as well, right? As a company, we are 50 people right now in the company, and so many of the people there are under 24, in terms of from like a campaign and execution perspective, because we constantly need to have that understanding of, okay, this content is doing well, this meme is doing well, this thing is going well, and then being able to inform brands about that has been the main thing.
And yeah, as you say, it's gone so much further beyond just using a different platform into a way of creating content which specifically is going to resonate. You alluded to then the way that you work with all sorts of different influencers. How do you go about, I guess, choosing those influencers and then working with them to produce that type of content to engage the audience?
So, how we go about it, there's twofold. First one is we've built like tech which can identify who is the most influential person in a particular segment or a particular vertical. But a key thing we've done is like, who is the most influential person in that niche? So we haven't gone for the biggest or even the most popular, right? But then I think that's fine because that's actually relatively easy to do. The thing they then have to understand is, how do I then overlay what is going on in the culture as part of this? So for example, like the government, we did a big campaign with them when the minimum wage came into place, because they realized that people from BAME backgrounds never knew when there was a increase in the minimum wage. And so what we then said to do was, we went, all right, these guys are using, these type of memes, they're using these type of references. And then you get the influencers to actually like push out that message, rather than just like an influencer going, hey, the new minimum wage is up, like sort it out. That's just a very one-dimensional way of looking at it. So those really are the two considerations that we take when we're working with brands.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about TikTok specifically now. I guess thinking about TikTok as a platform, how have you guys navigated the sort of rapid rise of that platform over the last 2 years? What have been the biggest surprises as well, I guess?
Well, the biggest thing was, so how people often talk about, TikTok is a social network and like competitor to Instagram, blah, blah. So I think that's complete crap, because what TikTok actually is, it's just a entertainment platform. Like, it's not actually a social network. And the people who know how to navigate the platform well are those who say, well, this is actually an entertainment platform. It doesn't really so much matter about the followers and fans you have. Actually, it's about the content and the creativity, and you can see this by the way, some of the key hires they made and the way they positioned themselves. They hired the COO at Disney to come and become CEO there. The reason why is because as a company, they are very much like an IP company. Like, there are so many new things that are being created on TikTok. There's so many niches and interests, like so niche that you wouldn't even think about. Last night I spent it like in the gardening niche. I was just watching people do gardening. I was like, where else would I see this? But I'll tell you where else you can see it: YouTube. So the true competitor of TikTok is YouTube, because they're both not really social networks. They're actually entertainment destinations. Now, the reason why that's important, and in answer to your question, is how did we navigate it? Is because we then started to understand that. We then started to realize, well, the biggest people on YouTube led with content first, and they began to like own stuff. So that's then why we then started to like exclusively manage TikTokers who were very unique in their style of content. That's why we just created the Byte House, because it was like, we're going to create a format and then we're going to distribute it through TikTok. Those are the ways that we started to think about the content and think about the way that we approach it, which is why with brands, when we talk to them, we don't talk to them just as like here are these people and they're big. We go, well, what's the audience they're going after? And then you then start to understand what is the content that's going on well in that particular audience, and then you feed them into that.
That's super interesting. What you said about TikTok, and yeah, it's when you think about it as an entertainment platform rather than a social media platform, that changes your take on it completely. You mentioned the Byte House there. Just for context of people who might not know what a TikTok house is, how do these groups of creators end up getting together, and what are they trying to achieve by forming a collective like that?
So there are two ways you can actually have a TikTok house. One is super easy. One is basically, here are some TikTokers, bring them into a house. That's not a business. That is basically, we're trying to bring a lot of people into one place and try and sell brand deals. That's not particularly interesting. That's basically trying to say that you're building like a mega influencer. That's not particularly interesting. And you can tell that to be the case because the people who do that, like, everyone looks the same, everyone acts the same. There's no real differentiation. where we started to think about the Byte House. So I built this thing and I started it at the beginning of lockdown, because I actually, at the start of the year, I was like, well, brands come to us to reach people and we also have the talent. But what if we could own a brand which ourselves we feel is representative of Gen Z? So that's why in the Byte House, you have Seb and Monty. One is 18, one is 20, and they're a gay couple. That's very representative of young people in the world who are struggling with issues of like sexual identity. You have Katie and Lily, one is black, one is white. They used to go out, but now they are two best friends. The black girl, Lily, comes from a middle-class background. Katie comes from a working-class background, which often, when you follow the narratives, is normally like the other way. But again, they are representative of how the world and how Gen Z is. So I think there's two ways that you can go about it. One is just, here are some people, put them in a house. But the other is you say, here is a group, and here is going back to the point about TikTok, like here's a form of like IP, which we actually think can scale, which is the reason why we've just done the Byte House for the last 10 months, and we've got a book deal. We are about to launch a makeup line, and we've got a deal with a streaming network, and that's just been in 10 months. But the reason why is because people go, these guys are representative of Gen Z. They're not just, a bunch of people that we've put into a house.
That's really interesting. So instead of having to, for a brand or an agency, have to try and retrofit an element of diversity to a campaign or a message, it's like you've put it into the foundations of what you're creating.
Yeah, and I think another part of it was we were like, sometimes it's almost like we're trying to convince a brand to do something that we know would obviously work. Why don't we just become the brand, right? And so we've done some insane stuff where if you were to pitch it to a brand, they'd be like, no. And then we've just done it off a cuff. But I think because we know it worked and we didn't need to ask for permission.
Yeah, interesting. And then the brand might see that a few months later and think, we should have we should have said yes to that proposal.
This has actually happened. I'm not going to say the name, but this has actually happened.
We've just got a couple of minutes left, Tim. I wanted to ask you, future gazing now, what's the future for TikTok and more broadly, what's the future for reaching and engaging a Gen Z audience?
What is the future for TikTok? The easiest way is look at what's happened with YouTube and just work backwards. That's it. Like, big stars are going to be created, but more in the sense of they'll have their own productions, and again they are less of a social network and more of like a TV platform. Like, you can get so niche with TikTok that is scary, and the algorithm will serve you more of what you are interested in. And so that would probably be what I would deem to be the future of it. Look at how YouTube has turned out. TikTok committed 200 million to build their creators. YouTube also did that 2 years ago. They committed 100 million. It's just the same thing.
Yeah.
In terms of for reaching Gen Z, so often I get asked this question about, what is the difference between reaching Gen Z and millennials and older generations? And I actually think there's nothing really different apart from the fact that Gen Z have grown up with the phone as the remote control to our world. So it's very easy for us to amplify things that we care about and that we don't care about. So I think that gap will widen even more, because there's even, Generation Alpha now who they don't even know what a TV is, right? So you suddenly have this thing where I think that gap would widen, and the importance of understanding content, understanding real distribution for this particular audience would get even more and more more and more impactful.
Thank you, Tim. We're out of time, so just to wrap up, I'm looking for your 15-second summary. So I guess if you were speaking to a marketer who had this challenge, which they potentially didn't feel too equipped for, of reaching and engaging a Gen Z audience, how would you give them 15 seconds worth of insight to start tackling that problem?
15-second worth of insight. I'd say go and hire more young people and just tell them to sit in your office or sit on Zoom and just tell you stuff that's happened. That's like the reason why a brand will come to us, the reason why a brand will use us over person X, is actually just because of like the insight that we have. Why would Samsung pick us for something when there's several other people in there? Because of like the insight that we have in the audience. So you can basically have that insight by having people who are tapped in with a culture, like just in your company.
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, stop guessing and just speak with the people who it is just second nature for. Mm-hmm. Tim, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, finding a bit more about Fanbytes, TikTok, the Byte House, and everything else. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon, and I hope your fifth and final appearance today goes well.
Cool. Thank you. It's really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And there we have it. That wraps up Clarity at Speed Live 2020. I guess a big thank you to all of our speakers. A big thank you even more so to everyone who's tuned in. We had quite a bold ambition for this event when we started thinking about it in the summer. And we're pretty happy with what we've pulled together on our first attempt. Hopefully you found lots of interesting ideas and insights throughout all these talks today. We will be archiving all of the content on YouTube next week. So just head back to the same website, clarity@speed.journeyfurther.com, some point next week, and all of the content will be on there. We will also be sending out a sort of follow-up email later on this evening with a few things for you to get involved in, to join the book club, to listen to the podcast, and to also, crucially, give us some feedback on what you thought about the day. What talks have been the best? What talks didn't you enjoy? What could we do a better job at? So please do look out for that email and be honest with your feedback. We can take it, honestly. So yeah, that's it. Over and out from Clarity at Speed Live 2020. But please do keep in touch.